Welcome, everyone, to the Zorich podcast. I am Chris Zorich, and on today's show, we have a former teammate of mine, which I'm excited about, a Notre Dame legend, All-American, fellow national champion, 1988, NFL veteran, and currently City Councilman for Cuyahoga Falls?
Cuyahoga Falls, absolutely.
All right, I got it right. All right.
Good. Yeah, listen, that's awesome because very, very few people get that right.
I said it like 60 times before I went on. So.
Yeah, no, it's a Native American name. So
wonderful. And I'm sorry, Frank Sands, everybody. Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
I'm here with all my friends.
There you go. And I like your swag in the background. That's impressive.
Just two items. Of course, the banner in the University of Notre Dame, and I think that's from the national championship game. And of course, my favorite picture in the NFL, and a lot of your Chicago fans will love this. It's probably hard to read the name on the back. Jim McMahon.
Love it.
Which I love him to death. I got to know him. He was with the Browns for a while.
Nice.
But that's when Jim was with the Arizona Cardinals, and they're wearing their throwback uniform.
Nice.
Came in on a blitz, brother, on an X-blitz. I came first. Pepper Johnson came behind me. And, man, I tell you, dude, you talk about picture-perfect tackle.
Oh, my God, off the ground and everything. That's awesome, man.
Good. You appreciate it. Absolutely. You got his feet are completely off the ground anyways.
However, it's not as good as the hit on Rodney Peete, which we will get into.
Love it.
Because that was one of the best games. I think actually, honestly, I think that game was more important than Miami, but that's a whole different conversation we can get into. The first thing I want to get into, though, is so you grew up in Cuyahoga Falls, right?
Correct.
So is that a kind of blue-collar mill town? I mean, what kind of neighborhood is it?
You know, it was really a bedroom community for Akron, which Akron was in the, I would say, 30s, 40s, 50s, even into the 60s. Not so much lately, but with the rubber boom associated not only with the war, but with the industrialization of the economy and the proliferation of automobiles, tires. Chris, I growing up in certain parts of Akron, when you traveled the freeways, there was a distinct smell, and I know you know that rubber smell, and it was prevalent everywhere.
Really?
In certain parts of Akron, South Akron and East Akron. And, it just, a lot of people complained about it. Not many, because the wise people said, no.
That was the industry, right?
Yeah, that smells good. Yeah.
These are mills. That runs our town.
So really getting back, Cuyahoga Falls was more of a bedroom community for people that, worked in Akron and Barberton.
Okay.
Barberton, home of Bo Schembechler.
There you go.
And so it was not so much industrial. So,
okay, gotcha. Now, growing up, were you always a great athlete? I mean, I know you played a couple of sports in high school, right?
I did. I played the trifecta: football, basketball, and baseball.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't know you're a baseball player. Okay.
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. But listen, if I had to do it all over again, I'm not saying it would have happened for me, but I guarantee you, I would have practiced at baseball a heck of a lot harder than I did. Now, actually, there were some schools that were recruiting me to play baseball. Oh, and you may not know this, but my freshman year, or how could you? The baseball team at Notre Dame approached me and wanted me to come out.
Yeah, your freshman year at Notre Dame, I was like 10, so yeah, I wouldn't have known that.
Am I that old? So and then my fifth year. Murphy, he was the baseball coach. He approached me again to play baseball. I actually put on a uniform and went out and hit with them in batting practice. And, both those times I look back and I said, man, how foolish I was not to pursue that. early on, I felt like, oh, I owed it because I was on a football scholarship, and I'd be missing spring practice, and it just wasn't comfortable. And of course, my senior year, going into the draft, I was like, oh boy, I don't want to give these teams the wrong impression that I might be playing baseball. That'll hurt me, in the draft. So, but it is a huge regret. And if I get a chance today, as you do, talking to youth, play them all. I was down in Ohio State at a Urban Meyer. This was when Urban Meyer was down there about 3 or 4 years ago. And they had their big football camp. And we're talking, I don't know how many kids, 500 in just one of the sessions. And he got out in front of them and said, listen, when we go and recruit, we recruit athletes. We're not looking for just, football players. We want the all-around athlete. So you know the drill on that. I mean, look at Antonio Gates, who went to school not too far from here.
Okay.
State, never played football in college, played basketball, and what now, 17 years in the NFL?
That's amazing.
Could be even more. Yeah.
That is amazing. So when you were growing, like as a little kid, I mean, you have the siblings. I mean, what was the family like? Were they all Browns fans? Were they Bengals fans? I mean, like how did that work out?
Well, not big. He didn't grow up in a big pro sports fan household.
Okay.
Certainly, we were Browns fans.
Okay.
My mom, not a big sports fan to begin with, but she appreciates sports. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, it was all Browns. Cavs and the Indians were just as big too. I probably went to more Indians games growing up than I did Browns games.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, because the Indians, what they play 6? What was it? How many games do they play in the
500 games?
Yeah, right, 500 games, right? So, and then back then you could go to a Tribe game, and on a Friday night they're playing the Royals. And you could, work your way down behind the dugout.
Oh, that's so cool.
Third base, and nobody cared. Today,
it's
like you got to show like 3 forms of identification to get to your seat. So it's a completely different world. And then, of course, the Browns game. The Browns were really, really popular, so that was a hard ticket to get.
Okay.
And plus, it's pretty. The Bear fans. The Browns take a backseat. Browns fans take a backseat to nobody.
Right. Exactly.
Probably wasn't the best environment.
To bring a little kid.
Right, an impressionable young kid to be going. So,
where did you find this love of sports? I mean, was it just kind of going to high school, or as a little kid, or even before that, or?
Yeah, so I really never liked football. When I was 8 years old, I cried and cried and cried before one of the practices to please don't make me play football. We had some really, the type, some really roughneck coaches. We're talking 1970. What would it be? Gosh, no, it'd be so. I was born in 65, so it would have been like 1974, 75.
Okay.
So, and the mentality there with that. And man, these guys, they were all, in their mid-20s, former jocks at the local.
Right.
And it's just like, we're going to, it's just, it was like, the meaner and the tougher we can make you, the better team we're going to have. And we had just lost a game. And I'm like, oh my God, I do not want to go to practice. But thankfully, they made me do it. And that's one of the, 50-50 shots, because some kids are made to do things, and you know how that story goes. And it worked out for me. Now, got into high school again, football, I don't need to tell you this, and all the ex football players out there listening, man, it's a rough road to go.
Right.
And there wasn't a day in high school that I didn't have a headache. With the amount of hitting, you'd open up practice with hitting.
Right.
Fit, it was just, you hit all the time. And that was, in Ohio, which, there's a lot of pride about high school football. If anything, we were tough competitively.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, Marty Schottenheimer, when I was with the Chiefs, recognizing that with Carl Peterson. And I thought, wow, that's, doing their homework. So that led to a certain amount of toughness, because I say playing ball at the highest level and in college, you got to have a certain amount of toughness, not only physical toughness but emotional toughness as well. And that really separates, I think. Well, that was a big part, I think, why we won there our last year, or my last year at Notre Dame, was that mental toughness. And and I thought we were, I don't think any teams out hit us. Anyways, getting long-winded as far as as far as my love of sports, I tolerated the pain.
Right.
I don't think anybody enjoys it. The people that enjoy it, you really got to keep an eye on it. I tolerate it. I did it because, listen, I was bigger, faster, stronger than most.
Than everybody else, right?
Yeah, than everybody else. I was expected to play, and then of course, when an opportunity to go to college on an athletic scholarship. I mean, how do you pass that up?
Right. Right.
You just got to suck it up and take it. Just like they were telling me, my parents were telling me when I was 9 years old, you got to suck it up and take it.
So were you a good student in high school? I mean, how were your grades? I mean, was it kind of more oriented with sports?
Yeah. Well, I was a great student up until about the sixth or seventh grade, and then I discovered girls. All right, and then the grades kind of suffered a little bit.
But even sports was the girls, right?
Oh yeah. I remember this coach asking one of the players one time. He was over there hanging out. This is in baseball, and he's hanging out with the girls before the game, and the coach yelled, or before practice, coach yelled over and he said, "Hey, 𝐿𝐴𝐿, what is this? Is this baseball practice or girl practice?" And I might, his reply was, "Hey, coach, why can't it be both?" And I'm like, man, this guy's my hero. Anyway, so then my freshman year in high school, I said, man, I really want to make a good impression. And I've got like a 3.8, 3.9. And then it just, kind of just went downhill from there. But I was able to score high enough on my SATs. It was the SAT back then that got me into Notre Dame. So, I look back at my academic career, and I will be the first one to admit I should have, probably spent more times in the books. You remember Bulak at Notre Dame, right? He handed out the books and all that. You went to him, you got your books at the beginning of the semester, and at the end you went and turned them back in. Well, I made the stupid mistake of turning back in one of my books. It still had the cellophane on it. As I'm walking out that little whatever room,
right?
He's like, "Hey, you could at least taken the cellophane off the book."
Oh my god!
Wow.
Well, let's actually talk about that a little bit. So, you're obviously a great high school athlete. I mean, you're being recruited now. Is it mainly schools in Ohio? Are you looking at Akron? I mean, that's obviously a hometown school. I mean, so what were your 5 recruiting visits?
My 5 visits. Notre Dame was my first.
Okay.
And they sent over, I think the guy's name was Corbett, former Navy pilot, and a little plane. And it was so I'm playing basketball, and we go out to the little regional airport, Akron, and he picks me up in a small plane, and the ceiling was like 300 feet. And he picks me up like at 11 o'clock at night. And it was kind of misting, and it was a terrible night. And my parents honestly thought that was the last time, as they watched the plane disappear up.
This is my kid. I'll never see him again.
They actually thought, yeah, that's the last time I'll ever see him. And so that was my first visit. And I did it on purpose because I really, was, if someone had to say you had to choose at the beginning, it would have been Notre Dame.
Okay.
So I kind of used that as a measuring stick. And then I went to Michigan. Schembechler was there. I went to Penn State, and Paterno was there.
Sure.
And Ohio State, and Earl Bruce was there.
Okay.
And so that's what is that for? Oh, and then my last visit, I went out to UCLA, and Terry Donahue was there.
Wow.
So listen, man, yeah, trust me, right? Yeah,
So you took all 5 visits.
I took, and the University of Mississippi called, and they went. There was a local tire dealer here, and was a big supporter, donor down there at the University of Mississippi, and he came to me and he's, basically, hey, if you take a visit to Mississippi, it'll really make me look good. And I wanted to help the guy out, but I didn't want to be eligible for like my first year of college. But I remember the Mississippi girls calling me on the phone and saying, "Hey, Frank, what you doing tonight?" And I'm thinking to myself, God. And they were going to fly me down on a private jet and the whole 9 yards. And I thought, man, looking back on it, maybe I didn't make the right decision. But
so wait, hold on. So there weren't any girls from Notre Dame calling? No, that wasn't it.
The Notre Dame girls, I think, they were too busy studying and, worrying about their careers, and I applaud them for that. But I will tell you,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
The year before, we went down to Florida on purpose. My dad drove down there. He was going to buy a car in the Miami area.
Okay.
There was a guy recruiting me, and I think it's still the same. If you get on campus, then they can basically, treat it like a visit.
Okay.
So that was a real memorable visit. I went down there and visited the University of Miami, and Howard Schnellenberger was there at the time, and I met some of the coaches, and they were really, really, really nice to me. Took me to a baseball game. The team was the Hurricanes were playing the Baltimore Orioles in a exhibition game.
Okay.
Really cool.
Well, what a lot of folks don't know, you actually made a living as a defensive player, but you actually were a fullback in high school, and you were recruited as a fullback, right?
Right. Was recruited. Well, so a lot of schools recruited me as a linebacker. Those schools I mentioned. Gerry Faust said to me, "Listen, you want to run the ball? We'll commit to you as a running back." And I thought, wow, that's great, because I always thought I was going to be the next Larry Zonka.
Of course, why not?
Right. Big fan of Larry Zonka growing up, and and he's from Stowe, Ohio, which is right next door from where I am today.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, local guy. He went to Syracuse. Yeah. So and that doesn't work out. I mean, it was actually horrific.
Well, hold on, Frank. So here's the thing I wanted to talk about was, so I'm assuming you guys heard of Faust when he was at Moeller, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so he makes that transition to Notre Dame, and I mean, was that a big thing in Ohio for a high school coach to go to Notre Dame, or wasn't?
Got a lot of noise. He came from a very, as you know,
Moeller,
a very successful program down in outside of Cincinnati. And I couldn't tell you the number of games they won during the stretch, but he was, perennial
sure.
power. The state champions. I saw him play a couple of times here. Well, Dewan and 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐻, I think were on some of the teams.
Yep.
So, people in the business, from what I heard, said, it was a big leap. But, as far as, people not in the business, maybe thought it was a natural progression for him to go from a very successful Catholic high school program to the Catholic university football program.
Also, you went to a very prominent Catholic high school yourself, and I believe you guys were called the Fighting Irish as well, right?
Yeah, how about that? I couldn't get away from it.
There you go, man. That's how crazy is that?
Right.
Now, it used to be your high school, right? So when people would talk about St. Vincent, St. Mary, that's the school that Frank Stamps went to.
Right. Yeah. I of course say that tongue in cheek. So yeah, that was I graduated in '84, and in 2000 I'm actually down there after my football NFL career. I'm down there assisting with the high school football team, and along comes LeBron James. He goes to St. Vincent-St. Mary, and of course I quip a lot when people ask me, "Where'd you go to school?" I say it used to be the high school that I went to. Now it's where LeBron James High School, and of course we know that story. But local Akron high school, not a very big Catholic school. We could never compete with Moeller.
Okay.
We were like back then they had I think it was single A, double A, and triple A. We were double A. Moeller was triple A.
Okay.
And so yeah, but it's still there. They're still hanging in there. And
wonderful. Now
they just won a basketball state championship. So
nice.
Yeah, post LeBron, and then post LeBron. I mean, kids across the state, if not the nation, want to go to Vincent-St.
Sure. So now you're at Notre Dame. You're playing offense. Had you played any as a fullback when you were at Notre Dame?
Yeah, I did. So my freshman year, I was a fullback, and then my sophomore year, I was a fullback. And believe it or not, we had some injuries at tailback. And going into the Navy game, they started running me at tailback because I was a tailback. I was a tailback in high school. I returned punts in high school.
Wow, that's awesome.
Right. Well, I go to Notre Dame on my visit. People are like, "What? This guy's a running back?" Wes Pritchett, to this day, Wes Pritchett still has an identity complex because I went there and I was just as big as him, if not bigger, as a tailback.
Oh my God!
He really doubted whether or not he should play football at Notre Dame.
Oh my God!
But anyway, so it just didn't work out. I mean, it just I wasn't a fullback.
Okay.
And I didn't enjoy. I mean, you know what a fullback does? My God. And it's a glorified guard, and it was a miserable experience for me. I ended up getting beat out by and I think the world of the guy Tom Monahan. He was a walk-on from Iowa, and Tommy was a great guy and a great fullback, and he just really did well at that position. And so I ended up losing my job in my sophomore year. And then, I was like, wow, and then, the transition still didn't come because that following spring, Lou Holtz comes in.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about for a little bit. So the guy who recruits you, Faust, I mean, you guys have had a couple bad years. And so now he's thinking, I mean, are there rumors, hey, this guy can't last. It's his last year of his contract. Is he definitely out? I mean, what was it like in the locker room?
So, yeah, the locker room was, not good. It was not good. And, and it wasn't good my freshman year. And it's not, it's not Gerry. It wasn't all Gerry Faust. It's just losing. You know what losing does to a locker room. Right. And it breeds contempt. And that's where we were. And it wasn't, and there was a lot of, there was a lot of strife with the staff in general, and the players that came to Notre Dame for that national championship like experience, and they just weren't getting it. And there's a lot of frustration, and I think a lot of anger, and that kind of manifested itself on the field, and especially in the locker room, and. So going into that last year, we, if I remember correctly, hearing rumors about maybe a change in the staff, and certainly as we got closer to the end of the season, those rumors got louder. And then, of course, there was the debacle at the end of the year playing Miami. After that game, Gerry, announced that he will not be coming back. And I look back.
So he announced to the team. Or he announced publicly or to the team?
No, to the team in the locker room afterwards.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was his last game. And, it was a really emotional moment. And, I applaud the university big time because in the days, and those were the early days of like, you could be one and done at some of these universities. Mm-hmm. Now. You're only as good as your last game. Notre Dame honored his 5-year contract.
Right.
And I thought, wow, what a wonderful example. Winning isn't everything. And, character, treating people is what it's all about. And to this day, I remember that. And of course, Gerry, tried to do the best with, what he had and what he saw coming, because It was kind of the writing was on the wall. It was just ugly. And boy, did things really change in the following 2 weeks. That's for sure.
Well, and that's what I think is so interesting is that you have someone who obviously, I mean, love the tradition. And Gerry Faust is not a bad guy. I mean, you still see. I mean, he'll give you a hug and hey, Chris, hey, I mean, he's a great guy. But then comes this transition of who do we get, or more importantly, when you guys get Holtz. I mean, what was that? Did you guys know who the hell Holtz was? I mean, was there a press conference like as a player making that transition? I mean, I just kind of sit in limbo going, okay, well, what the hell's going on?
Yeah. No, I agree. Gerry doesn't live too far from here. His grandkids went.
That's great.
His grandkids went to, because he came to the University of Akron after he left Notre Dame, and then he settled here and has raised his family here. And his grandkids went to school with my kids at St. Vincent-St. Mary.
Wow.
But, that transition as far as getting Holtz. I mean, to me, I'm just a sophomore. I'm still trying to figure out, a lot of things. And, a coaching changeover, I don't look at it like I didn't look at it then like I look at it now. And what are the ramifications for me and for everybody else? I was just like, we got a new coach. Okay. And what's that going to be like?
Okay.
And did I know much about Lou Holtz? No. Knew he was coming from Minnesota. Did I know much of his background? Not really. But I'll tell you what, he certainly introduced himself with a bolt of lightning. And I'll never forget that first meeting that we had.
Okay.
And, he came in and this is classic Lou Holtz. He says, he goes, just remember this. He goes, I chose you. Notre Dame didn't choose me. And I thought, that's classic. Wow. That is so classic. And, and I look back on that time and that initial meeting, and this is why his leadership is just, and you've had great coaches since then. I've had great coaches. That leadership is maybe paralleled, maybe with Bill Belichick. But he when he took a hold of that team, he never wavered one iota from what he wanted to do. Now, was that always served his best interest? Maybe not. But it was a winning attitude, taking a team that, Chris, there were some real issues on that team that we had. I mean, some guys doing the wrong thing. We had fights on the field, not between the players, but the coaches and players. Wow. And it was a real mess. And, and he came in and he changed all that. And it just was incredible. And like I said, it was his consistent, talk about leadership. And this is one of the biggest elements of leadership. In really as a parent, I try to practice is every day try to be that same person. Now, was Lou Holtz he was the same person every day? Was he the nicest person every day? No, but you know what? Neither was my father growing up.
Right. You're listening to the Zorich podcast with Frank Stams. One of the things that I thought I think is really interesting is, you're a young kid and there's a coaching change. And I mean, what was it like after the first week, the first month? I know attitudes changed, but I mean, were you like, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about? Or, hey, I'll follow this guy. He's a pretty good leader. Like what was that experience like, kind of maybe the first couple months?
Well, one word, I'll sum it up. It was sickening. And I say that not only emotionally, but literally. Guys, we had, right away, we had morning workouts. We had the off-season conditioning.
And you guys hadn't had that before, right? Not in the morning.
Not like this.
Okay.
Not like this. Okay. We at 6:00 in the morning, we were to report to the Joyce. All right. That means we're getting up at 5:15. All right. And in February, late January, February in South Bend, and I'll tell you what, it's a nightmare. And you're going to these morning workouts. It's pitch dark out, and when you're leaving, like at 6:30, we start at 6. It's say 7:00, 7:30. The sun's just coming up, and you're thinking to yourself, and a lot of times, and this is the off season, so if you were smart, you would schedule your classes, to start after 11 o'clock or 12.
Right.
You get to sleep in.
Right.
A lot of guys would go back, and I'd go to sleep, and I'd wake up after a couple of hours and just say, man, I just had the worst nightmare of my life. So we started that. At 6 o'clock in the off season, went for probably 6 weeks. You remember George Stewart? He was his enforcer. He was the enforcer, man. We literally had to toe a line, and we were armed. It was like I'd never been in the military, but I've seen the footage. You'd have to be an arm's length away from the guy next to you. I mean, you talk about instilling discipline back into a program. It was it. And when I say sickening, I kind of talked about the emotional angle, but literally guys were throwing up during these war and not being able to make it. And it was a real change of culture from that aspect, along with many other areas that also changed.
Well, and really that was kind of the start of obviously what was going to happen in the next couple of years, which were great things. But one of the things I want to talk about, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, there is a time when you and Coach Holtz had a conversation about your future at Notre Dame.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you call it a conversation. He did that. Wait, is it a conversation when you people?
Right, two people, right?
So this comes about. So that first nightmare of a off-season conditioning, we go into spring practice. All right. So here I'm a struggling fullback. All right. and not only that, I'm an I fullback at best. And he comes in and brings a veer option. And I thought to myself, talk about a challenge. And so I break my leg. I break my leg the first week of spring practice. Don't feel bad for me, because George Stewart later on, years later, says, Frank, you turned a bad break into a good one. It was probably the best thing. And remember, we were talking earlier off camera, there's always two ways to look at things.
Sure.
And so looking back, that was probably that bad break led to where I ended up being. And so, I have surgery. Yeah, I'm 6 weeks and now they put some hardware in my knee. It was a nasty, I completely dislocated my ankle, tore the ligaments in it, broke a bone on the bottom of I think it was my tibia or fibia. I'm sorry, fibia. And, I miss that entire next season. And then going into the spring, getting to the conversation, getting into the spring, Lou Holtz is looking to move this team forward. And I haven't played and practiced much in a year. And he's looking for available scholarships. And I was at the top of I had a huge bullseye on my scholarship.
Wow.
And luckily, Joe Moore tells me this story. He said, he goes, Lou Holtz came in and says, who wants Stams? I'm done with them. And luckily there was a first-year coach in the back row, raises his hand, says, I'll take the rum dum. And it was Barry Alvarez. And I move over to the other side of the ball. Now, looking back, George Stewart came to me and says, what do you want to play, tight end or linebacker? I said, well, what this is prior to that meeting. I said, what happened about me, carrying the ball? He says, not in the cards for you. And I think George may have wanted me because he coached the tight ends too. So anyways, I go over there with Barry that spring. And then the following season, I played a little bit. I remember playing, Flash and I were at the same position. I played a little bit, but I was still struggling with injuries. And it wasn't until my senior year, my 5th year, thankfully I got it, that, it all worked out for me.
So when you say it all worked out, I mean, you're being very kind. So I remember in practices, I'm a young practice squad guy, and you guys sound like you're having so much fun on defense and running around, playing around. And it's great because those things kind of inspired me to want to be part of your unit. And I remember I thought I was going to be the best linebacker in the world, but I had some kind of issues, and Holtz didn't want me to play linebacker because I sucked. So he moved me to the defensive line. Wasn't happy about that. But seeing you guys practice, Wes, you, Flash, Corey Southpaw, all those guys was really cool. So for me, you guys were a great example for a young kid to kind of look up to. And then your last year, my first year playing, I actually had a chance to kind of spend more time with you. So it was great because you guys were a great example. And I remember I loved our huddles because, I mean, people were joking around, laughing. I mean, just really having a good time. But literally, as soon as that ball snapped, I mean, we were savage fucking fire eaters, you know? I mean, we wanted to go out there and rip people's heads off. And I remember my first game, the 88 year, and I only remember this because it was my first time playing. And I just remembered our defense I mean, obviously with 𝐒𝐿𝐻, we wouldn't have been able to do it without 𝐒𝐿𝐻, but our defense, which no one knew about, just came out there and kicked ass. Can you kind of talk about kind of that first game and kind of what you thought about our defense throughout that year?
Well, no, I'd be happy to. And, I appreciate you saying that. And I had great examples too when I got there. Unfortunately, they just didn't have the success that we ended up having that year. And, I got to credit really the hire that Holtz made in 𝐏𝐻𝐻𝐸. And Foj really brought to that team something that I didn't ever see before. And that was, I think more people know the Jimmy Johnson kind of way to coach. Mm-hmm. Hey, let him go, let him play.
Right.
And that's why Foj was. And we actually had a coordinator that, put players on a pedestal during practice. And he just had our back all the time. And that gave us, a lot of confidence and a lot of belief in ourselves that, hey, we've got a guy believing in us. And it was just wonderful leadership. And of course, then they brought in Barry Alvarez, and Foj goes to the Vikings, I think, that last year. Barry takes over. Barry was the same kind of coach. You know that. And Barry's like, hey, let him play. Let him play. And you mentioned the chemistry on that team. The chemistry was perfect. It was a great mix between old and young. Sure. And you mentioned guys like Corny and Flash. And it was just, I mean, think about how to, and I know you have, is how do you make that all work? Well, you make it all work is you let the guys take over. And for me, that was the whole thing. I didn't have any success my first 4 years. But I finally said to myself, listen, I remember seeing Timmy Brown my senior year, not my fifth year, my senior year. He comes off the field and he says, man, you got to give me the ball. Because I can beat that guy all day long. I mean, and I'm looking at him and I'm watching him play. We came in together. I'm watching him play and I'm thinking to myself, I need to get that back. I lost that.
Wow.
And
I got the chills, man. That's
I know, man.
That you were able to notice that.
I got the chills too. And I'm thinking to myself, I need to get back and play this game like when I was 7 and 8 years old again, because I'm trying to be too much to everybody and trying to, step with the right foot and do this is like bullshit.
Right.
Just get to the ball. Like you said, just get to the ball as fast as you can. And that was the mentality. And I remember going in, getting back to your question, going into the Michigan game, that was it. Just beat the guy over you and get to the ball as fast as you can. And, we were able to accomplish that first game. That the story, in my opinion, 𝐒𝐿𝐻𝐻 on offense, but that defense, what we hold that team to, what was it? Maybe 14, 15 points?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, I think something like that, yeah.
So, and as you know this, you look at the season, there are games that defense wins and there's games the offense wins, and maybe the special teams wins one game. The defense definitely won that game and special teams, if you're including 𝐒𝐿𝐻𝐻.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit to the Miami game, and I want to focus a little bit on this because going into the game, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Steve Walsh, Miami's quarterback, had ever been sacked that year. Is that
I
correct?
heard something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And the previous years that y'all played Miami, it was lopsided, right? I mean, Miami just beat the shit out of you guys, right?
Oh man, they just trashed us.
And so, it was one of those things where I don't know kind of what Miami was expecting, but it was definitely something different than previous years. And can you talk about a little bit about kind of how you made your statement during that game?
Well, and so it was like the rest of the year. I mean, we're in uncharted waters. We're undefeated going into that game. None of us know how to act. Who knows what's going on? And but you got to point to the leadership we had, and Lou Holtz. He knew exactly, how he wanted to approach that game, and of course, we look for him for that leadership. But when I look back, and it was just like the Michigan game, or it was just like, I don't know some of the weaker teams we played that year. Maybe we played Rice, who probably hadn't won a game in like 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter whether it was Rice or Miami. Lou Holtz always had us thinking, and I don't know about this about you, but he always had us thinking if we didn't play our best, we were going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so
always
that, right. So that was like, I don't want to lose. I'm not just to give you some, I'm not a big guy about winning. I don't have to win all the time, but I'll tell you what, I hate to lose. So that was always my motivation, is I wanted to beat the guy over me. And if we won, winning wasn't it. It was just, I wanted to compete. And I didn't want that guy. I didn't want my coach in films the next day to say, hey, I'm the weak. I'm not doing my job.
Right.
That was my motivation. So fear in a way. So you get it back to Lou Holtz and his fear about, we may lose the game if we don't play the best. And so I think we always had an edge going into the game. And in that game, unlike I think the other games, is a credit to you and Pat Terrell and Tony Rice. We didn't have that kind of speed and athleticism to match what Miami was putting on the field. Yeah, I thought we were tough enough,
mm-hmm.
I thought we were decent enough athletes, but to respond like we did against them and score, 31 points? That doesn't get done without the combination of the younger players and the older players, and really the, how would you say, the wizardry of the coaching staff. And so my approach, I remember Musburger coming in, they were doing the game, and I'd heard that same thing about Walsh. And he says to me in this little meeting we have, and I always tried to have fun, it was a stress reliever for me. He says, what are your plans? Like you just asked me, what are your plans to get to Steve Walsh and sack Steve Walsh? I said, sack him. Because I just want to get back there and touch him to see if he's real. Musburger loved that shit. It was about 7 or 8 years later that I ran into him again. And he says, yeah, because I remember you, Frank.
Oh my God. You remember the story?
Oh yeah. We laughed about it a little bit, and he was a great guy. And so, that game, looking back at that game, man, I'll tell you, you're talking about back and forth. And, and the finish was storybook. It was just, I got guys today, just as I'm sure you do, come up to me and say, that's the greatest game I've ever been to.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because not being part of any type of game like that before, and I don't know how you felt, but it was, yes, we knew who the opponent was, but it was just like Michigan, right? It was just like Michigan State. I mean, it was another tough opponent. And I think that's one of the reasons why, Coach Holtz didn't make it, hey, they're the best team in the country. They won a national championship before. This is, we're really in for a lot. I'm not sure we can do it. He didn't have that attitude. I mean, he had the attitude that we can do it. And you mentioned folks like Pat Terrell and Todd Light. I mean, you have folks Pat was from that area. And so he was one of the main people that were like, man, these guys, I played high school with these guys. I beat these guys in high school. There's no reason why I can't beat them now, And so that kind of gave us that confidence of saying, oh, okay, these aren't, mythical figures. This isn't the mythical Miami. These guys, even though they may come off an airplane in Army fatigues, they're still beatable, right? And I love the fact that you made such a statement in that game because, again, he had never been sacked. You got him at least twice, made him fumble the ball, and I think I recovered one of those. So, I mean, the idea that you had probably one of the best games maybe in your career at Notre Dame was just amazing. And so, without you, I don't think we have a chance to win that game.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that, Chris. That is outstanding. Thank you for that. But, you recognized our teammates, and it doesn't happen. And to your point, he always had us. And that was the thing, is there, I tell young kids today, and you probably do too, is, there's no such thing as pressure. If you play every game, and every play, to your best, then, all situations are the same, whether you're playing Rice or Miami. So, I think we were ready for that situation because we were ready in August of that year. We were being prepared in August. And that's one thing that I think Lou Holtz always did. He said us prepared. The second thing to your point on that great game is I win the I think it was Chevrolet or somebody gives $1,000 scholarship.
Okay, yeah,
in their name back
afterward, right?
I was so disappointed because I took that recognition, that little certificate I got up to the I think it was Bubba Cunningham up into the athletic director's office. So if you make a donation to the university of $1,000 or more, you get a parking pass. And I thought my dad could really.
Oh, that is hilarious! I never knew that.
I thought my dad could really use a parking pass. And of course, when I presented it to Bubba, he just looked at me like I had three heads. I said, Bubba, it's in my name, right? And he just brushes me off. He says, it doesn't work like that. There were so many inconsistencies in that athletic department. I'd like to tell you more later on. We get to the national championship game.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's a great story. But one of the games that I think that was very instrumental in us having a chance to win the national championship was really Southern Cal. And I say that because, historically, there have been great games between Notre Dame and USC. And although it was a great game against Miami, that wasn't a game that folks considered to be a rivalry, but USC was. And before you had another phenomenal game there, I want to talk about kind of a situation that happened, and folks know about it because they've actually read about it and they heard about it. But I mean, I talked to a couple of guys who were obviously there. You were there, and what I'm referring to is that we had two players, Tony Brooks and Ricky Waters, that were late for curfew the night before, and we were playing USC. It was a night game, it was a later game, and we had a team meeting. And Coach Holtz announced that Ricky and Tony were sent home. Now, they were starters. They were younger players. So, I mean, they were happening to be both in my class. We were sophomores at the time. And I'm sitting there like, whoa, what? This is crazy.
Yeah, what moron made that decision?
And I kind of looked around like, oh, my God, what's going on? And from what I remember, Holtz made the announcement, and then he walked out and said, seniors, this is your team. And he walked out. And you stood up, Wes stood up. So a couple other guys stood up. Do you remember kind of what you said or remember the situation?
Yeah, and I blame Joe Moore for anything that I said in that meeting because he knew exactly what he was doing. And you remember the meeting beforehand where Lou had us into a room, and he told us the situation, And there was about 10 of us there. I'm sure you were there. And he told us what was going on, as you said. And he says, well, we can send them home, or we can, vote to keep them on board. And I remember Andy Heck was sitting right to his right, and I was sitting directly to his left. And thank God that he started with Andy Heck first, because if he would have started with me, I would have said, hey, listen, coach, we got to think we're number one. We're number one in the country. We're number two. We got you're thinking about sending 70% of our offense home. I mean, come on. Have you been drinking? Does it make a lot of sense? But see, not knowing, and offense and defense practice separately. We did so many things separately. I mean, we ate together. I think that was just about it.
Right.
So, and I love Tony, and I love Ricky, but I guess there was a bit of a history there, and so it seemed like all the offensive guys, went opposite of what I thought maybe we'll probably. But then, so coming out of that little round table, Joe Moore grabs me out in the hallway before we go into the big team meeting, and he said, and he puts it in my ear. He says to me, I don't give a shit who's on that field. He goes, well, we're going to win this game. And then he just got my blood start boiling. All right. And as I'm listening to the coach, talk about the situation, then he storms out. And of course, I being led around by the emotions, my whole life, I just stand up and make that comment, said, God damn it, I don't care if I'm the only guy. We're going to go out and win this game. And,
Dude, I got the chills again, man. I mean, look at this, man.
I've definitely got to footnote Joe Moore for that, rest of his soul, for that outburst.
But it's leadership. It's having a great culture, but more importantly, it's trusting your players, right? So Coach Holtz has this meeting with the seniors beforehand, and then you guys come out into the larger meeting to talk to us. Frank, I mean, I didn't know what we were going to do until you spoke, and I was like, goddamn right. I mean, I'm with Frank. So it was a situation where, as a younger player, that leadership we needed, right? Because had Holtz asked me, I would have been like, man, like you said, it's 70% off. I don't know. But it takes people who have been on that journey, who kind of understand, and you didn't know the influence you had on the people in that room. And I tell that story all the time about being responsible, discipline, and especially kids eat that shit up, because when I talk to them about how great we were, and I talk to them about how even though our 70% of our offense, they didn't adhere to the rules, they were gone. Now, somehow, some way, we were going to beat USC. We didn't know how, but we're going to beat them. And although I think playing Miami was a great experience for us, I think being in that team meeting before the USC game taught me so much about leadership and taught me so much about life. And we have a chance to go out, and we wound up beating the number 2 team in the country without 70% of our offense.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I echo everything that you're saying. You talk about leadership. In that game, we went from a favorite in that game to an underdog.
Yeah.
I mean, Vegas recognized the fact that, hey, listen, you guys, man, you guys made a bad decision. So, but you know what? You look back at us, and God, what a pair Lou Holtz had. Who would do that today, or even in the last 15, 20 years? And we've seen coaches and teams going into national championships that have had an opportunity to make that same
right.
and they don't have the guts to do it.
Right.
Whereas that's part of what's, if there were some flaws in sports, is making exceptions.
Sure.
That, that it may end up hurting society at a whole. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here.
Sure.
But you're not doing the players any favors.
Right.
Because a boss isn't gonna take that crap. So, so that's, and of course, what other and that was the thing about Lou Holtz, the guy, if he had fear, we never saw it.
Right.
And so what other option did we have? What, as a team, but to just, say, damn it, we're going to do this. And because, as you know, failure wasn't an option, and we couldn't go down that path or even entertain that thought. And so, I had no idea. I had been drinking before that meeting. I had no idea what I was saying. No, I'm kidding, of course. But I thought, wow, you know what? It's kind of, and I look back at it, it's like kind of cliche, but, and what you're telling me means a lot to me. You never see things, sometimes your perspective is so like this. And then when people start telling you other things, it's just like, damn, what we say and what we do really does matter.
Right. And I think that's what's so special about being involved in our team, right? And I think that, I equate that meeting that we had to our masses that we had before the games, and it was just the team, the home game, right? When we were all cramped in. I think it was Keenan Hall or something. We're all cramped in at itty bitty chapel, and although I'm not Catholic, I sat there and listened and looked around the room, and I was like, wow, these are my brothers. And and again, I'm not equating athletics to war, but at the time I felt like, man, this is the most important thing. It was kind of a do or die situation. And so I was looking at these guys going, man, I'm going to war with these guys. I feel like these guys are my brothers. This is what being a team is all about. I did that as a freshman. I didn't even play my freshman year, but that's how I felt. And so you fast forward a couple of years, I'm now in that environment where the guys on defense are dependent on me. And so that's kind of the overlying feeling that I felt when I was playing with you guys and for you guys. Just want to talk about one thing before we get off the USC game. Did you know in the split second when Rodney Peete threw that interception that you were going to hit him, or did you seek him out, or what was that like? And I don't have video capability, so I can't replay it. But if you can kind of walk us through it, I think it'd be great.
This is the irony of life. Okay, so I'm rushing. Let's see, we're going that way, and I'm rushing the left side of the defense. I'm over the right tackle, and the guy does a great job on me. All right, he pushes me so far up the field. I am a gazillion yards away from the quarterback. All right, and he does a great job. All right, but so now I'm directly if here. And then Rodney Peete is here, and the receiver, we're in a straight line. I'm watching him throw the ball to this receiver on an out, okay? And I'm in a straight line. And I'm probably about 7-8 yards away from him. And I watched the whole the play. I see Stan step in front of the ball, and all of a sudden the whole universe changes. Right? Because now I'm in a perfect position to come back and blindside him, okay? He never even saw me coming. He was drifting this way. He was going to probably try to push Stan out of bounds, and bam, I was in a great position. So I turned an absolute negative, which I was going to grade out into people like a YouTube thing. And of course, the sod in his helmet certainly didn't hurt.
Right.
Whoever that was in the broadcast booth. And all that, and then they put my stupid mug on television after that, and I made some unintelligible noise, and then I start coming after the camera like, get away from him. Right. So life is just crazy funny like that, and it was so as far as the process, it was all impromptu.
So, I mean, until then we had a chance to win the national championship, but can you kind of sum up kind of your experience at Notre Dame? I mean, you had a coaching change, you were possibly going to lose a scholarship, you were injured. I mean, there were so many emotions, negative and positive, kind of throughout your 5 years there. Can you kind of sum it up and talk about your experience there?
Oh, wow. I mean, you take a page from, some of the great, books, tale of really two stanzas or tale of two, sides of the football, or, I mean, the whole thing. I mean, it wasn't just football. It was, the academics experience as well. But, it was just such a period of discovery. It was such a period of introspection. It was such a period of trying to find out who I am. There were times when I'll take you to the lowest moment of my football career ever is after I didn't play in a game, and a hometown reporter came to the game from Akron here to cover the game, and I don't even see the field. And he interviewed me in the locker room afterwards, and I literally broke down in my locker, and he knew exactly, the space I was in. And then to go to fast forward 3 years and a linebacker and playing in the championship game. I mean, man, you talk about the highs and lows. It's just it was a huge emotional roller coaster for me. So my experience was the best, the greatest, and then it was also the worst. But we come out of it so much better well, I was a better football player, and ultimately a better person, because when you experience those kinds of crappy, shitty moments, then you can start putting, a little bit of ways you can have empathy for other people in the world and know that it's not always easy
right.
for everybody.
Right.
So you start lending people a hand up. And, and I had people do that for me. Barry Alvarez was one of them. And I guess to sum it up, that's it.
So you went from broken leg, fullback, possibly going to lose a scholarship, to playing a new position, winning a national championship, getting a certificate, becoming All-American,
right,
and getting drafted by the Rams. I mean, what was that like? I mean, like literally in a year and a half?
Yeah. So I wish I had my plaque here. Gosh, do I have it? Oh, I know I got it somewhere. Mr. Hot Sauce, you're talking to Mr. Hot Sauce, second place at the Mr. Irrelevant weekend. And I think you know what that is. It's right. The last person chosen in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it at Newport Beach. So I go out there after the draft. They fly me out, and Mr. Irrelevant weekend is going on. I mean, hundreds of people down on the beach just partying crazy. So the coaches take me down there, and we're enjoying the party. I mean, this is crazy. I'm going to parties with coaches my first weekend there. I'm like, I can't. welcome to the NFL.
Right, exactly.
So they get on up there. They were doing this Mr. Hot Sauce where guys were taken down into their bathing suits, and and then some of these guys had the Speedos on. I wasn't going there. I took my shirt off, and really that's what probably cost me Mr. Hot Sauce first place. But I still got that plaque. I wish I had it here somewhere. But anyways, I mean, it just I got me talking about that. I forget. Going to the Rams, and gosh, I was thinking maybe, I would have liked to have gone to Chicago like you did. I would have liked to have gone to Cleveland, but looking back on it, wow, I am so glad I went to Los Angeles and was part of that for about 4 years of my life. And then I got the best of both worlds of, coming back to Cleveland and finishing up with Cleveland, probably with one of the greatest NFL coaches of all time. So,
well, I was going to ask you that. I mean, what's it like? I mean, I know personally, but for you, I mean, what was that experience like playing for your hometown team? I mean, that had to be, I mean, that had to be insane.
Oh, it was awesome. It was just simply awesome. I remember when they traded me. Chuck Knox then was the coach of the team in his first year. I had John Robinson my first 3 years. Chuck Knox gets the team, and of course, as you know, new coaches, they're looking to bring their own players in, get rid of the players. And so I was a victim on one end with him, but a recipient with the Browns, because Belichick was in his second year with the Browns. They were looking to bring in their own players. So they had traded for me. And I remember my parents were out there on a home and home thing, and they took my car to go out to Las Vegas. This is before cell phones. And while they're out there, they trade me to.
Oh, shit. I didn't know. Are you serious?
Right. Yeah, right. And so I had to track them down. And finally I did. I said, listen, I got good news and bad news. And I said, well, what's the good news? I said, the good news is they traded me to Cleveland. And I said, well, he said, well, what possibly could be the bad news? I said, the bad news is take my truck and keep on going. Go from Vegas to Cleveland. All right.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, it was just crazy. I show up in Cleveland, and God, man, you know this. You're playing in front of your friends and family. It doesn't get any better than that. And of course, then post NFL, my wife and I are here in the same town that I grew up in, and we raised our 2 children here. Been married for over 20 years now, and she is just man, she's put up with all my issues, problems. I mean, she should have been a therapist. She missed her calling.
Well, I think it's interesting. So did you have, and I know you've done some broadcasting as well. I mean, was that part of your plan? Like, did you have a plan when you were done? I also want to talk about your kind of foray into politics as well, but talk to me first about kind of the broadcasting thing.
So my plan in life was similar to me rushing the Rodney Peete.
Okay.
I have really, and this has hurt me. This is not something that I'd put on a resume. I needed I was never one to have a plan. My plan was to get up in the morning. All right. So that's as far as I planned out. And of course, that's not a good recipe for success, because I tell kids now, you got to have a plan.
Right, exactly.
I wish I'd have known that then. So, basically living by the seat of my pants, how I became a councilman. The mayor invites me to the State of the City address. And I said, man, I grew up in this town. In 45 years, no one's ever invited me to the State of the City.
Nice.
So I go to it and I said, the mayor might be somebody that I'd like to get to know. So I take him to lunch, then I take him to breakfast. And then the third time we met, he says, hey, you ever think about running for council? And I said, well, not sober, I haven't. He said, no. He goes, you'd be, you might do a good job. So I ran. I ran as a Democrat in a strong Republican ward.
Okay.
And I ended up winning because I got on the doorstep, Chris, and I said, listen, let me tell you something. My strength is that I was not a politician, or I didn't have any political background. My weakness was I was not a politician. I didn't have any. So I got on the doorstep. I said, listen, people would look on whether I'm a Democrat or Republican. And I said, listen, you're not going to find it on there, because when I was in the locker room, there were no Democrats and Republicans. We were all pulling together to win and make us better. And people, and rightfully so, in my opinion, they loved it. And that's what it should be. That's where, as far as the plan, haven't really had one. Just kind of looking to write the next chapter of my life, taking it day by day, and God willing, I'll do that.
Well, it's also interesting because when you talk about politics, you talk about kind of serving the public. I mean, there's an aspect of service that is involved with that. I mean, where did this kind of desire for service to come from? I know I was doing some research, and you mentioned a quote from Gandhi called, or I think the quote was, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," or something like that.
Yeah, no, so you're absolutely right. Be the change in the world you wish to occur.
Right.
I'm not quoting it. Yeah, correct.
So where did this understanding of kind of public service come from?
Well, I grew up in, my father was apolitical. My mother was political. Both my grandparents were members of grandfathers were members of the union here.
Okay.
Rich and Goodyear, and they worked all their life. If it wasn't for their union and their legacy benefits, they could have been living in a cardboard box at the end of their life. So, I think, so you see, in our formative years, growing up, in 72, my grandmother babysitted me, and all I did was watch Watergate for 2 weeks. And if that doesn't have a profound effect on a kid growing up, then I don't know what will. So I can't, I got to say, that was a strong influence. How it was, I don't know, but it had to influence me in a certain way. And this is the other thing that I tell people, for you, I'm sure, as well as me and a lot of guys we played with, it was really easy, as far when it came to sports, and sports was a big part of, our lives. We were always picked first. But I always thought to myself, what's it like for the kid that gets picked last?
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't think it was fair. And to this day, I'm always rooting for the underdog. I don't care. Even when Notre Dame plays and they're a heavy favorite, I'm rooting for the underdog. Because, and I say that, with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but, I always wanted to stand up. I always railed against bullies. And, in a lot of ways, government can bully people.
Sure.
And, they can take advantage of the laws in place. And sometimes, we're seeing it certainly today.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It is a perfect example of sometimes the world is not just.
Right.
And I always railed against that. And instead of talking to the television and getting angry at everybody around me when the news is on, I said, you know what? Maybe I should go out there and try to make a difference. And that's where it came with Gandhi, be the change in the world you'd like to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love that quote. So instead of, talking about it, get up and go and do something about it. So that's where the essence of my, political, birth began, is wanting to be the change in the world you'd like to see.
And I know another experience you had with actually a former teammate. You guys teamed up, governor and lieutenant governor, for Ohio, and that was what year was that?
2006.
Okay, and then, now that was an unsuccessful run, but what did you learn from that experience?
Well, what I learned from that experience is the next time that I do this, is I'm going to go around the neighborhood and just knock on doors. Because it was as you mentioned, governor and lieutenant governor, I was his choice for lieutenant governor, and it was a statewide campaign. And I'll tell you, man, that's a whole nother ball game from running just locally in your neighborhood. And, and how I got involved is Brian Flannery and I were both in the insurance business. And I said, Brian, let's get together and maybe we can do some deals. So we have lunch. I said, Brian, what about this? What about that? He goes, yeah. He goes, did I tell you I'm running for governor? And I said, Brian, that's awesome. But he had a political background. He came from a political family.
Okay.
He was a councilman in his ward. And I said, Brian, that is awesome. And that's when I learned, Chris, never ask a politician what you can do to help.
Oh my
because
God.
2 weeks later, he says to me, Frank, what do you think about being my lieutenant governor? And I said, now, Brian, does that show the people of Ohio that you have He said, no. You know more about politics than you think. He goes, go listen to the current lieutenant governor speak down at the Akron-Canton airport. So I grabbed a friend of mine. I went down there. And I came back to Brian. I said, where do I sign up? Wow. I said, shit, I've been watching that shit my whole life.
Wow.
So the lieutenant governor, he comes in, he has a couple of drinks, he shakes a few hands, he gets up there and tells a couple of stories, and he's gone.
Wow.
And I said, man, if that's what being the lieutenant governor is all about, sign me up. But of course, we all know, there's a lot more to the jobs than that. But that's how that. And then, of course, we made a lot of noise. I'll tell you what, Brian ran, he worked. The other guy didn't outwork Brian. We weren't the political machine.
Okay.
And, we lost in the primary vote. And then ultimately the that guy we lost to, Ted Strickland, ended up winning the governorship.
Okay.
So, but that was the first foray. And now speaking about Brian Flannery, Brian is currently running for the Ohio 11th congressional district seat.
Oh, wow.
Vacated by Marcia Fudge, who's been appointed to Joe Biden's cabinet.
Okay.
And so he's in a big time serious primary challenge himself. And the special election is going to be held, I think, sometime in the beginning of August. So
okay.
I would, we'll get the word out to our guys.
That is great.
Yeah.
That's nice. So when you think about kind of your experience and leadership and culture, can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the things that you've faced, the leaders that you've been around, and kind of what's important in a locker room, in a business, in a corporation when you think about culture?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful question, but you know that. So there's a couple, what I've experienced myself and what I've learned and have read and what I've heard and watched is I think there's two key elements in today's world. And one is consistency. And, it doesn't matter if character matters, but whatever you do, with character being a given, good character being a given, whatever you do, you've got to be consistent. Every day you want to show up.
Right.
You want to be the same guy, and you want to have a plan. And that's what I saw in Lou Holtz, and that's been a wonderful example for me in my life as a parent. So how do I apply that? And so what I've tried to do is be the same guy for the kids every day and be consistent, because I think that kind of environment, one, is a good example for the kids, and also it makes them feel safe and loved. And I think with those two combinations, they'll develop a lot of confidence. And of course, confidence in children is at least 75% of the battle. So that's what I tried to accomplish. The other thing, I read something about a year ago. They were interviewing a woman, chief executive officer, and I'm sorry, I forget her name, but they asked her, what is the single biggest thing that you want to share or teach your children? And I thought her answer was, one, surprising, but also outstanding. She said kindness. And I said, wow, how about that? So, and then especially in today's world, we're getting so detached with the digital world. We're getting so detached, and the income inequality that canyon is getting greater and greater between the haves and the have-nots. I think society is becoming angrier for so many social ills that have happened in the past hundreds of years. We've got to, and hearing the Pope talk about this, is that digital world, we're starting, because we're becoming so digitized and remote, and we're starting to lose a little bit of our humanity. And so that we tie that into kindness. So I think that's a really huge element for success, not only professional success, but also personal well-being and spirituality. We talk about what's the one thing we talk about is mindfulness, healthy mind, body, and spirit.
Sure. So
that's where I try to be now. What I look for in leadership as well. So those are the kind of examples and things that I try to strive for. I'm certainly far from perfect, but at least we recognize that, and we're trying to be better.
Is there a mentor that you've had that you feel has impacted you the most throughout your life?
Yeah, I would. Outside of my parents, I would say I had a teacher in high school, Mrs. 𝐤𝐻𝐿𝐴. You would not believe the nicest woman in the history of the world, and she would. She just was so kind that and every day, consistently kind. And it wasn't, she didn't, I could, as far as I could tell, she didn't judge. She was always positive, always had a smile on her face. I remember her telling a couple of stories about when she was in college and how it really bothered. She'd walk around the quad and not, get engagement from other people. Now, I know that's a little bit Pollyannish, but it's still, it's still an ideal, and that's a huge influence. In fact, when Gerry Faust came to visit me from Notre Dame, a school visit, and me, I went. Back then, when you're a kid, you listen to adults. You don't talk.
Sure, right.
It took everything I had to ask him. I said, "Will you just please do me a favor? Go visit this Mrs. 𝐤𝐻𝐿," and because she was a big Notre Dame fan, and he goes down there, and man, does he command the show? I mean, he just takes over the class. Okay, It was just a great experience. And then as far as examples, I had. Other than that, I had two great coaches. One in high school, he was a St. Vincent-St. Mary graduate.
Okay.
John Stone. That and his buddy at Dick Pitts. These guys were rocks. They were rocks, and they were along with and then of course Lou Holtz. I mean, you just. I talked about high school, college. A lot of times there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot, you're questioning yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Even though it's amazing, you start talking to players, you get into their psyche. There's guys with a lot of confidence, but then there's also guys with not a lot of confidence.
Absolutely.
But they get on the field and they know one thing and they know how to compete. And so, and during that whole process of doubt, self-confidence, it's so important to have those guys you can look to that are consistent and they're every day.
We're going to wrap up in a couple seconds, but one of the things that I always I want to talk to guys about, and from your current position as a city councilman, your experiences in the NFL, your college experiences, I mean, what would you tell a 18-year-old Frank Stamms who's walking on the campus of Notre Dame?
Wow. Man, I wish I could have that conversation. I really wish I could have that conversation. Is take advantage of everything that Notre Dame has to offer. Engage with the university and the other students, and believe in yourself. Those are just the two things that I would tell a young Frank Stamms. Work hard, and work hard. When we had the three things that were maybe up on the walls is do your best, do what is right, and treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. That's also in there. But looking back is what an opportunity we had to go to the University of Notre Dame. And sometimes I've got a lot of regret not taking full advantage of that. But I'm not complaining, and so I've been very fortunate and lucky to have the experience that I've had.
Well, and I think as we get older, those crazy things like seeing the alumni walking around with like those crazy pants with like the Indian leprechauns and shit like that. Like we used to make fun of them, right? Like, oh, you idiot. Right. And now that's us, right? That's us going back there. And it's funny how things like tradition and all the things that we thought were hokey are important now. As we get older, as we have kids, as we realize it freaks me out to hear that like Lou Holtz was our age when he was coaching Notre Dame. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like when you think about those perspectives, it's almost like, wow. And then you think about like at the time, for me, I didn't understand what we were kind of going through, how important that was until years and years later. I mean, I thought we were going to win a national championship every year. Frank, after you left, we lost one game next year, right? So I'm like, hey, this is going to happen all the time. And it was so kind of eye-opening. And one of the things that I kind of talk about a lot is those lessons that I learned in that locker room from people like yourself and Coach Holtz, Andy Heckley, the older guys, and kind of how that still like allows me to be the leader, the father, the business. I mean, it allows me to be the person I am. And outside of winning games, I'm so happy that I spent those 4 years at Notre Dame, because that experience has helped mold me as an individual and a person. So I wanted to kind of selfishly get you on to kind of thank you for being one of those leaders that has kind of made an impression on me, but more importantly, your talk. And again, as we kind of talked about before, you don't know the impression you make at the time, but I'll never forget that. And that's one of the biggest memories that I have about my experience in Notre Dame and really understanding what it means to be a team. So, Frank, I just wanted to say thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for those remarks, and I mean that sincerely. You go through life and you think, you're hoping that you're making a difference, and on the positive side. And I remember, Dave Butler, who was a year ahead of me, and his son, or not his son, but his brother passed away of colon cancer, Danny Butler.
Okay.
And I remember having a conversation with Danny, near the end of his life. And, he shared with me, he said, Frankie, there's just one thing that, I want to know about is did I matter? And I'll never forget that. And so that really, I've taken that. And you talk about the lessons we learn and how we grow and we mature. And I think that's one area that, I've really focused on is, not being that, I was so a lot of times unaware of what was going on. But now I'm more aware, and it's like more aware of what we say and we do is matter. So
sure.
You just said, and being on this broadcast really matters in my life. And that gives me the strength to go forward and continue to try to make a difference. So thank you very much for I appreciate you and everybody else that was on that team, because it was a magical time for a lot of people, not just the players on the field, but the Notre Dame community and college football fans everywhere.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. Thank you so much. Frank, thank you very much. I appreciate it. This was another edition of the Zorich podcast. I'd like to thank everyone watching and listening. Most of all, my wonderful mom and daughter team of Kylie and Candy. They are my production crew. Without them, I would not be able to do this because I have no idea what I'm doing sometimes. So kind of fading in and out, and maybe eventually someday having commercials would be cool. This podcast, along with our other podcasts, are available at my YouTube page at youtube.com/ChrisZorich50, and also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Frank, this has been awesome, man. I do appreciate it, and look forward to hanging out again in the future.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
All right, brother. Go Irish.
Go Irish, baby.